center of the village. And he wanted this to be like a nice New England town and have a village square. And so he set that aside and gave it to the town. But he gave it on one condition, and that was that the village would take care of it, would do something to improve it. And he had a son-in-law named Dorr Burnham, who years later was a mayor of Battle Creek. And one day he was going through some papers that belonged to the city of Battle Creek, and he discovered that in a matter of a couple of weeks, the city would not own that property because the city had done nothing to improve it. And so he decided that it shouldn't belong to the family, although it would revert to the family. There was no greed there. And he decided that it was time the city did something about it. So he and a bunch of guys just got together and they borrowed a couple of lumber wagons and they talked to a man who had a lot of seedlings over on the south side of the Kalamazoo, and they crossed the Angel Street Bridge, went a little bit westward with their lumber wagons, came back with a load of trees, planted them in McCamley Park, and so it's been the city's ever since. McCamley was the one who built the canal. He built it with Irish labor, and the Irish labor used pickaxes, shovels, and wheelbarrows. And the entire canal was built by that. What? And a lot of them were Irish. You see, there had been the potato famine in 1825, and there were lots of wanderers. They had come to America and they couldn't get jobs in the East, and everybody was just moving west. There wasn't a railroad yet, but they kind of meandered around, and there was enough, wasn't a lot, but he just took what he could get, and the pioneers were too busy doing other things, so he was delighted to get some Irish labor. And you know, that sort of grapevine, the news travels fast. So probably as soon as he hired them, why, they came in droves from Detroit, walking the whole distance, no less. Seems to me I have too much stuff here all together. One of the things I want to tell you about is the ague. The ague was a disease, and they didn't know any other name for it, so they called it the shakes. You may guess then that it was malaria. They knew that it had something to do with swamps. Over near Dowagiac, all of the pioneers built their houses with no windows or doors on the swamp side because they knew it had something to do with swamps. But they didn't know it was the mosquitoes from the swamps that caused the trouble. But this was called the Michigan ague, and again, Michigan ague because there were so many swamps. And there was another disease, cholera, but that only hit very badly one year just before McCamley moved to Battle Creek, and that hit worse in Athens and in Marshall than it did here. But ague was with practically everybody. And Amy has written a story about the poor old Justice Polydore Hudson, who knew that he was going to have the shakes on the day that he was supposed to perform a wedding. You see, the ague, malaria, is very periodic. They know just which day the shakes are going to come. And that was his shakes day. And still, he was going to perform his duty. So he took an awful lot of quinine. They knew that that was good for it, and it really was. But the quinine and the ague both caught up with him before the ceremony was performed, and Mrs. Hudson saved the day by taking him out and pumping cold water over his head, and then he was able to continue, and he performed the ceremony with some degree of understanding, at least. If you are going to read any stories, you might like to read the stories of the Quakers in the underground. You'd like to read about Sojourner, who was brought here by the Quakers. You might like to read something about some firsts in Battle Creek. Cornflakes, for example. And did you know that dear old peanut butter was invented in Battle Creek? Not jelly, but peanut butter. The first traction engine that anybody can trace, even Ford, the first traction engine was built just south of the Battle Creek River between McCamley Street and Capitol Avenue, and its first venture was up Capitol Avenue from the Battle Creek to the top of the hill there by the Catholic Church, where the Catholic Church is now. And since it could pull its own weight up a hill, it really was something, and other manufacturers began making traction engines right after that. Not too far from here, over towards Climax, Moore's combine was used first. Of course, he had to use 20 horses, but just the same. It's a first. And the rural route in this entire Midwest was started over in the same area. Out in Urbandale, there was the second mile of, not the first mile, but the second mile of cement pavement in the state of Michigan was placed out there. We published lots of newspapers and magazines. That's a good story by itself. The San and the influence of Mrs. Ellen White. If you're an Adventist, you certainly want to read it. If you're not an Adventist, by all means read it. She's the gal who gave her husband's funeral sermon because she wasn't satisfied with what everybody else said, so instead of feeling all broke up, she just got up and gave the funeral sermon. And as I understand it, talked quite a while. I think she most always did, for that matter. And she wrote dozens of books. They were called testimonials, and they were all written by the hand of God because she would have visions. And Dr. Kellogg's brother said that really, he was writing a history of some of the Adventist background, and he said, you needn't worry about Mrs. White. She won't have any more visions after she's had the menopause, and I guess it worked out that way, according to history. But you may either make fun of her or not make fun of her. There's a sanctum sanctorum of her works and memorabilia about her in Washington, D.C., Tacoma Park, the headquarters of the Adventist Church. But then you can make fun of my ancestors, too, because everybody, as my son-in-law says, has a drunk uncle. Just go through your family and you'll find out. The Library Association was the second one in the state. And Anne Graves, for whom Ann Avenue is named, was the go-power there. That became the Women's Club, and they started the library, which is now Willard Library. There were repeated floods. They began in 1852. Perhaps the worst one was in 1904. But there were droughts and there were floods, and in 1924 there was a plan to build to redo the bed of the Kalamazoo River so that it would not cause any more trouble. But the city fathers got sidetracked a little bit and didn't do it. And then when it was done a few years ago, they paid $16,000 to have the survey made, and as near as I could tell, looking at the two maps, they were identical. But you see, they had to have it done right up to date. So anyway, it's been done, and we haven't had a serious flood since. Out in my area, you could study about Beadler, you could study about Serby, and are they characters? Both of them wrote and were very interesting people. This was the first Beadler Park, which is at the north end of Gogwak Lake, and was a resort out there. And this was the Serby resort next to it. Serby antedated Beadler by about 2 years, and Beadler was always jealous thereafter. This is the typical kind of camp that was put up in those good days. This one is 1871. I believe that date is. And I will end by reading you from the report of a group of girls that went out to Gogwak to camp. I can't give you all of the details. They're really priceless of the things they had to take with them in order to go out. But this, she says, breakfast at the usual hour, 11. Can't you see how devilish they felt? Have all decided to take that important step in life called matrimony until we can find someone to furnish us with an oil stove and short wicks so that we can get a meal in at least 3 hours. Thank you very much.